Wow, what a beautiful song there. I actually enjoyed the lyrics of the song and, you know,
the dance steps.
Yeah, seriously, it was really fun. Indeed, children are the leaders of tomorrow.
You know, to further drive the discussion, let's bring in our guest for more insight on how child labor impacts on the overall health of children. She is Barrister Maryam Abdul, the founder of Women and Children's Rights and Empowerment Foundation. Ma, you're welcome to KSMC Breakfast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, and first and foremost, let's look at child labor. What is child labor?
Yeah, child labor is basically the act of children doing work that is beyond their capability in terms of their health, their strength, their intellectual capacity. So just a child doing something that's beyond that child's ability and capacity. Okay. Mostly domestic chores or rigorous chores.
Okay, so when you say doing things beyond their capacity, we want to find out what are the different forms of child labor?
Yeah, there are different types of child labor. So there's agricultural child labor, for instance, the children that farm. There's a kind of labor that children do in industries, like factory work. And then there's domestic chores as well that they do. So those are like the three most prominent chores that, you know, or labor that children do.
Okay, so this child labor, how does it really impact on the physical and emotional well-being of these children?
Physically, you can imagine a child doing something that is beyond his capacity, like you know, carrying heavy, lifting heavy things. You can imagine a child working for long hours, 8 to 12 hours in the farm. You know, that's beyond their muscular or even their physical ability. Then you can imagine the mental stress of a child waking up as early as 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6, and working for a long stretch of hours. So it impacts mentally as well, because children want to play, they want to rest, they want to do so many other things that they don't have the ability to do or the right to do during these you know, jobs that they give them. So it really impacts, you know. So it's just quite an unfortunate situation that we have our hands on.
Okay, but does that mean, you know, a lot of times you find out that some children are naturally very lazy, and when they're being asked to do some kind of house chores, they feel as if they're being drilled because these are things they feel they're not supposed to be doing. So what do you want to say about
There's
that?
a difference between house chores. I mean, it's not illegal. But then there's also a restriction on it. So a child below 12 years old, even at home, cannot do more than washing plates and sweeping 1 or 2 places. Once you start to give a child below 12, I'm actually giving you the age. Once you give a child too many tasks, you know, below that age, it becomes a form of labor. It becomes a form of labor. And then, of course, like you've mentioned, the lazy children. We really need to do a lot of work in that area with children of this generation. They want to just sit down and watch TV and play with their phones and so on and so forth. And there has to be some level of discipline. You know, I mean, in our time, we swept, we did chores, and we didn't complain. Now you ask 1 or 2 children to do something, they sigh, they're upset, they say, if it's in a foreign country, they'll probably call the police or social services and say that the parents are wicked. So I think there's a dichotomy between this kind of child labor, quote unquote, and the child labor that we know of.
So how does it affect the overall well-being and the health of the child?
I mean, short term, we can see the damages. They are exposed to more dangerous and hazardous, you know, jobs than the regular children. So short term, you can see injuries and immediate mental depression and things like that. But then, of course, long term, you see deprivation of accessibility to education, accessibility and rights to many other things that regular children, you know, have. So these two things, I think they're like twins. They work together, the mental and the physical damage that it does to the child.
Okay, I know possibly government have actually been, you know, doing a lot to ensure that this issue of child labor is being reduced to the barest minimum. So to what extent has this government policies helped or failed, you know, in terms of curbing this practice?
Government has come up with A lot of policies. There are also criminal liabilities for child labor. We have the Child Rights Act that speaks about, it's a policy on its own, that speaks about what children should do and what they shouldn't do. And of course, child labor forms one of the things that children should not do. Apart from the fact that it deprives the child of their rights, it's illegal. So that's one. And then we have international labor articles that Nigeria has ratified and has domesticated as well. I think in 2003 there was a whole slew of such acts, and we've ratified them and we've domesticated them, and they've become a part of our own policies. We also have international labor laws as well, and of course we have national policies. But you can have a million policies, but if the brain set or the mindset is such that it's something that is culturally acceptable, you can have a billion policies and your mind will be closed. So I think the way forward is not really dwelling on the policies because they're there, they're criminalized. There is 5 years imprisonment for anybody that is caught, trafficking these children or having them as child labor, and then there's a 500,000 naira fine. So there are lots of policies and there are lots of things that are there in place. But unless people understand the damages that these things are causing on children, I think we have a long way to go.
Absolutely.
So you said it's not about the policies, but about the implementation. So we'd like to know, what role do parents or guardians have in to play in mitigating against these menaces?
Yeah, they have a lot to play. They also don't understand the extent of the damage it is, because it's something that you see your parents do or your guardians do and so on and so forth. I mean, in Nigeria, many years ago, you have a child, for instance, and then they send you some girl from the village. It is almost as popular as green, white, green. It's something that we've always been doing, for instance. So you have a 10-year-old carrying a 6-month-old baby. It's something that is done. So unless we kind of unchange and unpackage the mindset that, oh, this is a small child and does not have the mental or physical capability to look after a 6-month-old baby. You have to explain that at that level. So there's a lot of advocacy and a lot of sensitization that has to be done before you now go into policies, because you can't imagine telling somebody in the village, you're going to prison, you're going to jail if you do XYZ thing. I don't think it resonates as much as explaining to them. You can even use a religious connotation. How would you like your own child or moral to do something like this, and go on and go? So we have a lot of work to do with parents and guardians.
Okay. And as founder, Women and Children's Right and Empowerment Foundation, I believe probably you must have come across issues like this. Or what have you been doing, in your own capacity to ensure that issues like this are being settled?
Yes, we do town hall meetings. We do a lot of focus group discussions. We do a lot of one-on-one talks with parents and guardians, because, like I said, we have to almost turn their brains upside down and try and culturally and religious-wise try and explain to them the impact and the damage, they're causing on these children. And it's not just unique to Nigeria. There are sweatshops in India, in Pakistan, and even in the UK, in China, and it's not something that's unique to us. So we try to explain to them that these things are like unacceptable. And then we try and understand that, don't you want your children to have a future? Would you like your children to have your situation? And then you come and understand that there's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of unemployment. The fastest and easiest way of getting money is to send out, if you have 5 children, you send out 3 girls for chores, 2 to some factory or a farm, and you get instant, gratification. So it's kind of like you're explaining to them or telling them that you just stay poor because there's no other option. And if you also look at it, these things are structurally against them in the Nigerian context, because you have children who come from poor families and their parents have skills, mechanics and things like that. It's almost identical with having a parent that's a medical doctor or a lawyer. Your child goes into that, so they feel as if, oh, you think it's only you that your children continue on in your line. So it's kind of difficult to talk to them and explain to them, but once they're 18, we've explained to them. Once they've reached the age of majority, they can now do these jobs that you want them to do. They must not start at 6 or 7 years old. Find something else for them to, you try and fend for them, you know, and so on and so forth, until they've reached the age of majority, where it doesn't become child labor, where it doesn't become illegal. So we try to explain these things to them.
And I believe they've been yielding positive results.
Yes, yes.
So like, what should one do? For instance, if I have a neighbor who I discover that has been maltreating, if I can put it that word, or forcing a child to do what is above their strength, what should one do in such scenarios?
You can tell such a person to call the National Human Rights Commission, for instance, and speak to somebody there. There's Legal Aid Council. You can link them with or report such a case to, or even to the police, or even to the police at the barest minimum. There are all sorts of services that you can call. You can even call civil defense, because they have a human rights desk in their offices. All these paramilitary or parastatals are equipped to handle such cases. And of course, NAPTIP being one of the highest levels, you know, of places where you can report these issues. We're not very nosy in Nigeria. We're afraid, you know, to do, if you see something wrong, I mean, we see it every day. You go to the market and you see a woman, what they call Hajia, or one Alhaji moving, and you're scared to ask, because it's I mean, we're citizens, they're citizens' arrests, they exist. You have the right to ask, oh, please, sir, you know, this child is so, he can tell it's his daughter or it's his cousin or something. But at the end of the day, we're doing something positive. I think we have to be our brothers and sisters keepers at some point. Well, that's the...
All right, and so what do you think is the way forward?
Well, the way forward, I mean, of course, policies. Second to policies is sensitization and advocacy, like I've mentioned. And then a lot of work. I'm working in the area of out-of-street children and the Almajiri system at the moment. And I'm going to local governments, speaking with traditional rulers, religious leaders, speaking with a lot of people and trying to, like I said, try to break these norms and these cultures and do a lot of advocacy. I think that's another way forward. So once there's policy and then there's sensitization, then there should be a lot of physical talks, you know, a lot of talks, a lot of sensitization, and that's really the way forward, trying to break this cultural attachment we have.
All right, we have been talking to Barrister Maryam Abdu, founder of Women and Children's Rights and Empowerment Foundation, on how we can collectively add our voices to rescuing children from forced labor. Thank you very much, Ma, for sharing your thoughts with us this morning on the program KSMC Breakfast. And we hope that when next we call on you, you'll definitely oblige us with your presence.
Happily, gladly. Thank you so much.